Thank you, and thanks for sticking around for the ninth presentation today. I know it's late in the day. So we're moving now to from interrogations of technology to television's interrogation of technology. This presentation concerns Black Mirror, a series some of you might be familiar with. What is it? Let's see. That keeps an audience interested in spending 50 or indeed 100 hours in front of their television set watching one TV series? Screenwriting guru Robert McKee provided an answer in a recent interview. The key is great character, he said. People are fascinated by change and revelation. When the characters are exhausted, and when there is no more change or revelation, when it becomes repetitious, that's when TV series die, said Robert McKee. It's all about character, said Damon Lindelof, the co-creator of Lost. And television scholar Jason Mittell observes that nearly every successful television writer will point to character as the focal point of their creative process and how they measure success. Certainly, several of you will be able to remember one or more of these characters, including their names and the shows that they belong in. This is because the writing for these series, whether we are talking about multi-seasonal or one-season narratives, revolves so profoundly around their central characters. To conceive of Sharp Objects without Camille Preaker or Breaking Bad without Walter White is simply impossible. No doubt in these cases, McKee is right that character is structure and structure is character. Even the briefest of summaries of the storytelling of any of these shows would hold their central character's journey central, as in chemistry teacher is diagnosed with cancer and becomes a drug lord to pay for his medical treatment. Chances are, however, that only a very few of you will be able to name any of these characters, who all belong in 11 different episodes of Black Mirror, Charlie Brooker and Annabelle Jones's TV series. More likely, those of you who have watched the series, or some of it, will remember a few of the stories that these characters appeared in, and will be able to describe the central conflicts or concerns of individual episodes. Like the drone bees. Look, that's the episode with the drone bees. From the very start, Brooker, the main writer of Black Mirror, conceived of the show in terms that were strikingly conceptual. In writing about it for Guardian before the first episode premiered in 2011, in December, he asked the question, "We are addicted to gadgets, but what are their side effects? If technology is a drug, and it does feel like a drug, then what precisely are the side effects?" So there is no mention of character, but of technology. The Black Mirror of the title, Brooker explained, is the one you'll find on every wall, on every desk, in the palm of every hand, the cold, shiny screen of a TV, a monitor, or a smartphone. Inspired by Rod Serling's classic The Twilight Zone of the late 50s and early 60s, Brooker wanted to create a show that allows the viewer to be plunged into a slightly different reality, a different world every week. That's what we were aiming for with Black Mirror, he wrote. Each episode has a different cast, a different setting, even a different reality. But they're all about the way we live now, and the way we might be living in 10 minutes' time if we're clumsy, said Brooker. And if there's one thing we know about mankind, said Brooker, it's this: we are usually clumsy. Black Mirror, then, was conceived of as an anthology show, where the unifying element and the signature tone revolved around questions concerning human interaction with technology. There is no central story arc concerning the change or revelation of a character over time. Rather, character-level changes and revelations are sudden and over and done with over the course of a single episode narrative. Before we move on to the next story, You can pretty much dip into the universe of Black Mirror wherever you want. And you can invest a few hours of your time without committing to months or even years of watching to find out how it all ends. So is this sci-fi? Brooker prefers the term speculative fiction because mostly, if not exclusively, his what-if stories are told from the perspective of a future so imminent that it reminds the viewer eerily of the present moment. Like Margaret Atwood, whose novel The Handmaid's Tale was published in 1985, Brooker finds the moniker science fiction reductive because it carries the wrong cultural connotations. It was editor and critic Judith Merrill who idealized what she called speculative fiction in the late 60s as a way of examining, quote, some postulated approximation of reality by introducing a set of changes, imaginary or inventive, end quote. So, even if Black Mirror is very much about change and revelation, because I believe it is so in the way that it addresses these terms as something that is collectively felt. The genre and style of individual episodes might shift, but Black Mirror nevertheless feels singular and focused in its main concerns. The show's perspective is prismatic in that its multiple vantage points collectively address culture, in the sense that the theorist, academic, novelist, and critic Raymond Williams understood the term. In his book, Culture and Society, Raymond Williams defined culture as a way of life. A whole way of life is the specific quote. Brooker's creative interest revolves around questions concerning how technology shapes a whole way of life. And if one were to isolate one significant aspect of this interest, one element that appears across episodes and seasons, I would argue that this aspect is the show's critical engagement with what David Lyon calls the culture of surveillance. As Lyon argues in The Culture of Surveillance, book that came out last year, concepts such as surveillance state or surveillance society seem increasingly insufficient in describing what he instead prefers to refer to as surveillance culture, which is characterized by user-generated surveillance. Users themselves act surveillantly as they check up on, follow, and score others with likes, recommendations, and other evaluative criteria. This has been a topic earlier today, too. Lyon is in part inspired by Gilles Deleuze's notion of what he called the society of control, in which surveillance grows less like a tree, rigid vertically, like the panopticon, and more like creeping weeds. Less like a tree than like weeds. Contemporary surveillance, Lyon suggests, now twists and travels at speed, seeping and spreading into many life areas where it once had only marginal sway. Not only being watched, but watching itself has become a way of life, he observes in The Culture of Surveillance. So Lyon sees a shift from Big Brother to everyone is a surveiller. To Lyon, these cultural and technological changes imply a shift from Foucault's notion of panoptic surveillance to what he calls performative surveillance. To Lyon, it's important that performance orientation is precarious, fragmented, and it happens in real time, so that a situation can be exploited by both government and corporation. Black Mirror's focus on technology is instrumental to its conceptualization, and the critical question one might ask of the series then is whether it gives more weight to technology than to character. A skeptic might protest that the significance of fancy design is a true design of superficiality over substance, and that there is something hollow about placing technology and gadgets at the center of a story. Writing about science fiction films in 1965, Susan Sontag argued that in these films, or in those films, things, objects, machinery play a major role. She claimed, and I quote, "A greater range of ethical values is embodied in the decor than in the people. Things, rather than the helpless humans, are the locus of values because we experience them rather than the people as the sources of power. In the case of Black Mirror, however, I would argue that this is precisely the point, that the technology of the series is always a source of tremendous power and that it embodies ethical values. It is important, I think, to note that great care goes into the presentation of technology in Black Mirror, and that the creative process that informs this presentation is collaborative. Whereas Brooker is rightly credited as the main creative force behind the show, writing almost all of its stories and scripts, he works very closely with the UK VFX studio Painting Practice in making Black Mirror. So rather than the creative work of the art department, graphics and VFX being split up, the people at Painting Practice actually collaborate interactively in a digital art department that is responsible for designing the universe of Black Mirror in its entirety, from production design through VFX. So it's not the writing first and then the design and the effects afterwards. They work with how technologies depicted collaboratively. So Painting Practice thus plays an instrumental role in creating production designs that revolve around interface design, a creative strategy that makes for an uncanny realization of the imaginative scripts by Brooker. In fact, this aesthetic component goes far beyond providing Black Mirror with a distinct visual style. Rather, it's constitutive of the ways in which the characters and the plots are developed in the series. As Rob Walker observes, the makers of Black Mirror are thus faced with a fascinating design challenge. The fictional technologies depicted on the show have to be recognizably not part of the world we live in, but plausible additions to a world we live in soon. And that plausibility usually entails making them appealing or even desirable. So in describing how the designers at Painting Practice made Martha's drawing board in Be Right Back, Joel Collins muses, "If I was a designer designing technology, I wouldn't go all Kubrick necessarily. I would try to make you feel comfortable." Thus, Painting Practice designed a digital pen made of wood so you get the feeling of a brush as you're drawing in the episode Be Right Back. And certainly there are viewers who will not only enjoy this high-tech drawing board, which combines touch-screen functionality with easels, but also would want to own it. In 15 Million Merits, the characters live in tiny boxes in which every wall is a screen. Although the specifics are unclear, significant parts of the population seem to have moved underground after an energy crisis. So Painting Practice has described in interviews how the script for the episode was the first that they started to work on with Brooker. They could have used visual effects, but they were in fact filmed much of it live. So they wanted to make it feel real. So this is actually a bedroom that really is made of screens with cameras set up above to look down into the room. The latest of LCD screens at the time. Self-monitoring that appears across stories in Black Mirror also stretches across time, and the performative engagements of its characters with their present and past life experiences does indeed collectively present a form of surveillance that does grow like creeping weeds. But even the grain, the memory recording neural implant device that the characters insert under the skin, isn't so immediately unappealing when it's first introduced. Its timeline interface is circular, with the user's life episodes marked off in concentric circles to resemble the rings of a tree, according to designer Joel Collins. You're scrolling something like tree rings to bring out your memories. At first, it makes you feel comfortable. The technology seems smart and even sort of wondrous. But as the episode evolves, some of you might know, the viewer is gradually confronted with its many dark temptations. Sensing that his wife has betrayed him, the episode's main character, Liam, faces the implications of infidelity in a world where its documentation is unavoidable and fateful, so that he ends up using the grain to turn the surveillant eye on his wife's past. Thus, not even the past is safe from the surveillant gaze in Black Mirror, and the future is bound to be shaped by it. Thank you.